Thanks, Lisa. So our next story is Alan DeBay, who boasts, well, he wants the superpower of time travel, but he also boasts a superpower of being a super storytelling fan, which I think a lot of us would agree with, right? And he has an amazing collection of storytelling postcards and autographs, over 100, I think, right, Alan?
Yep.
So he is just wonderful. And I have some excellent pens because Alan heard that I ran out of pens and he mailed me some pens. He's incredible. So time travel or not, he is a superhero storyteller and he's here to share with us the story of The Helping Hand. So please welcome Alan. Thank you, Alan.
Tonight, I'm going to tell you the story of Robert. Robert was born in a little house on the prairie in 1924. He was born on the same land that his great-great-grandparents had homesteaded on in the 1970s after the Chicago fire had wiped out most of the town. The same area where his grandmother had arrived and said, "You brought me here to die," which she did, but not until many years later. Robert grew up in nature. By the time he was 3 or 4, he could go outside and he could smell the air and he could tell you when a rainstorm was coming hours before it arrived. He could also look up at the clouds and he could tell you by the color if there might be hail or a tornado coming. By the time he was 9 or 10, things were really rough on the prairie. I mean, they didn't even have electricity. They would have to go to town and get a block of ice to put in a box to keep their food cool. And when he went to school, he would trap animals and sometimes he would even get a skunk. You might not be excited about a skunk, but Robert was. You see, Robert, back then, a skunk was worth $5, and that was a lot of money back then, but he would wait until the next day to retrieve that skunk because of the smell. Well, Robert's father worked hard on the farm, and he raised crops like corn and wheat and alfalfa for the cows. But one day, Robert didn't come home. Robert's father didn't come home. And they went out and they searched, and they found that he had passed away of a heart attack in the field. But there isn't time to grieve on a farm. The crops don't allow it. That year, the local farmers came out and they helped them do the farming. But the next year, it was all up to Robert. Robert even had to drop out of high school his junior year and do all the farming. And every night he would go to bed and he would pray for a helping hand, that a helping hand would come and help him with the chores. And one day, a helping hand did arrive, but it was just a hand, unattached from a body. And at first, Robert was pretty freaked out by that helping hand that wasn't attached to a body. But when he saw how hard that hand could work, he was glad he had that helping hand. It did all the heavy lifting and everything. And that helping hand was able to help him out so much, he was able to go back to high school. And in 1944, he finished high school and he was mighty proud of himself. Now that was during World War II. And Robert decided that he was going to go and join the Navy. He said goodbye to the helping hand and told it to help his mama and help do the farming. And he went off to Chicago, where basic training was by the Great Lakes. And he did hours and hours and hours of drills. And if he made a small mistake, the commanding officer would say, "Hey, Kansas, what do you think you're doing? Pitching hay?" Well, this motivated Robert. And he worked harder and he learned more and he did everything really, really well. But one day he came down with a high fever and a rash, and they told him he had scarlet fever, and his whole barracks, since they had been around him, had to quarantine. We all know what it's like to quarantine for 14 days these days, but he had to quarantine for 30. But you know what? That helping hand would show up with a nice bowl of chicken noodle soup and some mashed potatoes for mama. And that helped him get better. And he did get better. And then he was assigned to his assignment for the war. He was assigned to on a ship to escort a rubber ship from Florida to South America, because back then rubber was what needed in the war for tires and boots and shoes and rubber pontoons and even medical supplies. Most of the time he enjoyed his time on the ship, but once in a while he would get a little homesick. And when he did get homesick, the helping hand would arrive with a letter from mama. Dear Robert, I miss you, but the helping hand is doing a very good job. I hope you are doing well there. Love, Mama. And Robert would write back, Dear Mama, things are pretty good here, but I do miss you. And the food isn't nearly as good as yours. Well, the next time they arrived in Florida, the helping hand was there with another letter in a box, and he opened up the letter and it read, Dear Robert, I can't stand you not having good food to eat there. I've sent you a box of brownies. And he wrote back, Dear Mama, thank you for the box of brownies. I've shared them with the crew and they now all consider you their Navy mama. Love, Robert. P.S. I think we will be coming home soon. And he was right. They did get to come home soon. And he settled back on the plains. He was no longer among the waves of the ocean. He was now among the waves of grain. And he settled in, and one day he was at the grocery store and he felt a tap on his shoulder. And it was the helping hand pointing at a girl that he knew from high school. And the helping hand made a little mouth motion and pointed again, just in case Robert didn't get the point. And he walked over and started talking to her. And next thing you know, they were courting. And 6 months later, they were married. And that's how the helping hand helped Robert find another helping hand. Marie was about 5'2" and petite with brunette hair. And Robert, he was about 5'10", stocky with black, thick hair. And they settled into life on the farm. Robert's mom moved to town and let them have the farm. And they farmed for about 1.5 years together. And then Marie got pregnant. And 9 months later, they had little Jim. And guess what? Jim got his own helping hand too. And at night, when Marie and Robert were tired, the helping hand would rock Jim back and forth in the cradle and kept him sleeping so that they could sleep too. When Jim was a little older, his mother had taught him how to play patty cake, and his helping hand would play patty cake with him. Patty cake, baker's man, bake me a cake as fast as you can. Pat it and roll it and put it in a pan. Patty cake, baker's man. Well, when Jim was a little older, the helping hand would help him with math. Most kids only had 10 hands to help him with math, but he had 15. Robert and Marie went on to have 3 more kids, Jim, Jerry, and Jack. And they all grew up and they all graduated from high school. And Jim, he went off to college, but he didn't do that good at college for some reason. He moved back home. And then there was John, and John, he went to college too and went to work at a college laboratory. And Jerry, he ended up going to the Navy like his father, and he became a nuclear engineer. And then there was John, and John graduated and he became a veterinarian. Well, as time passed, as it does, Robert aged and he grew older and he'd start falling down, and the helping hand would have to pull him back up and help him back up. As time passed, Marie passed from this life on to the next. And one day Robert noticed that his helping hand had started losing some of his pigment, and he knew that his time was coming too. And the day that Robert passed on from this world to the next, the helping hands lost its pigment until it was completely invisible. However, at Robert's funeral, the helping hand was there with a glove on so that all could see, and it carried Robert's casket to the grave. And I'm sure that that helping hand went on to help somebody else. But I believe that we still have helping hands today. Do you ever feel like sometimes your load gets a little lighter, or that you accomplish more in a day than you think is possible? Well, that might just be a helping hand. And if some days you don't feel like you have a helping hand, guess what? I have helping hands too. And I bet that there are lots of people in the audience tonight that also have helping hands.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you so much. What a delightful story. And I know that you are a person who lives with helping hands. You really do help people from far away.